Welcome to Per Her Perspective, a podcast of raw, relatable conversations on leadership, challenges, and solutions in running a business, often with the support of smart peers. The show inspires business owners to grow, make bold decisions, and go bigger with confidence. I'm your host, Marla Noel. Let's get started. Hello, my name is Marla Noel, and I'm host of Per Her Perspectives, a podcast interviewing women business owners. And today I'm interviewing Danielle Sprouls, who is the founder of Unscripted Pivots LLC, a coaching and consulting firm born from her acclaimed Unscripted Pivots podcast. She's on a mission to redefine WTF with a framework that inspires leaders and teams to wake that flame, win the future, understand when transformation fuels, and more. And Danielle is the author of WTF, Women That Flourish. So Danielle, welcome
Thank
to
you.
this podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Marla, for the invite. And I really look forward to diving into a conversation that I'm sure is going to be robust, insightful, and entertaining. Because that describes our friendship.
It's already been pretty entertaining.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I love your book, and having written a business book, I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
So what was it that motivated you to write this book?
Two things. First, it was a challenge that I accepted from a friend who knew I began this project a couple years ago and asked me, when's that coming out? And he attached a date to it just to get me going. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. That date did come and go, but it's what got me off of, my butt. And I began to write the book that I had been flirting with for 1 or 2 years. And so that's what actually made it happen when it did. But why it did is another story. I was determined to reach all of the people out there, primarily women, but men also experience curveballs, and say, hey, let's look at our moments, which a lot of times have us saying to ourselves, WTF. Let's look at these moments of surprise, those moments that disrupt our autopilot and throw us off course. I wanted them to look at it from another perspective because really what at the core of the book, Marla, is pivots, how to pivot with purpose and clarity. And introducing the WTF language, all that does is bring some levity and some humor to the situation. That was born from the podcast called Unscripted Pivots, where I interviewed women for about 1.5 years, much like women like yourself, people that were, well accomplished. And I wanted to talk to them about how they got from here to there, or there to here, rather. And all the curveballs. And I said, when you were saying like, what the heck, like WTF? And I knew that I couldn't use what the word stood for. So Women That Flourish was born because at the essence of the podcast was resilience, how we come back, how we endure, how we grow, how we expand, and how life surprises us. What may look initially like a problem is really an opportunity. And so that's how that whole thing happened. And the book goes on to just redefine WTF in probably 100+ ways.
Yeah, the one thing that I think I know you from, we've talked quite a bit, but you also shared in your book some of your experiences growing up. And so I want you to talk about who inspired you growing up to do all the things that you've done, because you are amazing. You're an attorney and very successful in a variety of ways. And I want to talk about that later, but who was it that inspired you?
I don't even know that I could attribute it to one person. At the forefront of any of these questions will always land with my grandmother, Dee, who I talk about a lot in the book. She was a very powerful presence in my life. And when my mom and my dad divorced, she pretty much just started to raise me by age 15. I spent most of my time with her because my mother relocated to Texas from New Jersey. And she's just always been something that was always there. And in the book, I talk a lot about her. There are personal stories. And for the people that know me, I'm understood to be very transparent and authentic. And I come from Jersey, and maybe that's culturally just like suitable to that. But I was reluctant at first to put too much about my own life in the book because I didn't want it to read like the diary of Danielle. Like if somebody that was reading it didn't go through the things that I went through, whether it's being like, loss, certain losses, divorce, job changes, I didn't want to alienate them. But
Yeah.
then I was encouraged. No, people want to hear it so they can see why. And that really was a big difference. The book is just being embraced because people can see me and they can relate even if the details of their life is different, they relate to the emotion. They relate to that phase, that season of their life. I would say, my grandmother, but my parents, Marla, they're both 2 very different people. My mom's gone now for about 10 years, God rest her
Mm.
soul, but she was very, creative and inquisitive and more of a, like, freelancer. She was a businesswoman, but she had a heart of gold and she wore it on her sleeve, and she just, she was the one who taught me about horoscopes, like, things that my father, the German, kind of really intelligent trial lawyer, was polar opposite. I almost had a whole package, even though they were, fundamentally very different people. But from a parental standpoint, they influenced a lot.
So you too are a parent.
Yes.
And I use you when you talk about your children, you light up. So
Everything.
just tell me a little bit about your children because you were running, well, you were in sales as you were growing these amazing people. So
Yeah.
tell me, how was that for you? Because I know managing a family and business is something that a lot of business women experience, and we all struggle with that. So tell me about that.
Well, so before I had children, I was practicing law briefly. I was pretty much I got married in 1987, started law school 2 months later, did that full time, graduated, passed the bar in the first time, Yahoo, because that was great since it was a year where it was really, really down. They almost had to kind of offset the numbers. But I was fortunate enough to pass it and then start practicing, but then found myself, pregnant. And that wasn't something that we were planning on immediately, but we had been married 4 years. We had a house. We were certainly set for that. And their dad, my first husband, was, about what, 12 years older than me. So he was certainly ready. So in comes the kids. Then I had one, took off briefly, and then I went back to practicing law. And then I was pregnant with the second one. And I share that with you because I had a moment of clarity that I wasn't going to be good at either of those things unless I chose one. And you have to remember, this is like, back in the 90s, and there was just less at your disposal to do things. And being in a a law firm, there was very few women that were present. I didn't really have any role models or encouragement. And I, on the fly, decided, okay, maybe I need to stay home, which was a decision that my first husband, their father, wholeheartedly supported. He wanted me to stay at home. So I did that. But then I had number three, and then I had number four. All within about 8 years, I had four children. And so what we know about me is that I'm fertile. Okay. So it was absolutely beautiful. Three boys and then a girl. Once I was staying home with three boys, I did want a girl, and boom, she came. And that's when I knew I needed to close up shop. Now, I did not do that medically speaking, but I looked at my husband at the time and I was like, I really want to go back to work. And I happened to mention it at a party, and an attorney that was there said to me, I'd hire you in a heartbeat. I like your energy. You've got the personality. So I said, well, I'll be a little rusty. I've been a stay at home mom for a while, and my brain's not as sharp as it was. Right. And we laughed about it. And he said, no, I have a commercial title insurance agency. I'd like for you to work in sales. And I will tell you, at first, I thought, I don't want to be selling insurance policies and I know nothing about it. But what I do know is sales. I
Uh,
mean, that is not only part of my blood, but even training as an attorney in litigation and preparing, the senior partners for trial. I understand what it's like to put forth an argument. I know how to ask questions, and I certainly know how to try to influence and motivate decisions. So it was a natural fit, and I grew into it, and that's really what became the career. Within 6 months of working part-time at a New Jersey-based agency, I was recruited to a large firm in Manhattan, and, the rest of it is history. It took off like wildfire, and so then it was decided that that would be my career. Over the course of 20 plus years, I've closed over $20 billion worth of commercial real estate.
yeah,
So,
amazing.
it was the mainstay. But it's all relationship driven, and you're working hard. To your point about the children, how do you do that? Well, you have to replace yourself. So then, the nanny comes. I had a live-in nanny. I had a housekeeper. I think of all the roles that a stay-at-home mom does when she has a family. Well, you have to hire your replacements because my first husband was also an attorney and he was very busy and he didn't have the time. He was really great with all like helping out in the household, but you need to replace yourself. So there were a lot of people in the home while I was out working and going from New Jersey to New York and then traveling the country in business development and commercial real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know how successful you have been, but you also, as a mom and as a businesswoman, you did one thing that I think was so funny that you mentioned in the book. You had a rabbit, a ferret, a guinea pig, a chinchilla, a
Yes.
hamster, a dog, and 2 cats.
Yes.
My goodness, how
I know,
did you handle all
no,
of that?
as though a lot of cages, a lot of litter, but, it's so funny when I look back at that. I mean, we finally we fondly refer to that as the Sproles Zoo. Now, what I have is not an affinity just for animals because I do, but I have a weakness for my children and for their asks. And so literally when we refer to all those pets, what we have to look at the bigger picture of me weakening while we're at a pet store, getting food or litter for one animal, and then lo and behold, there's other ones for sale and who would be in aisle 4 begging for the cutest next little gerbil or ferret or and sometimes I'd say no on the spot, but eventually that next trip we were coming home with somebody or something. Listen, I have 2 dogs today. I would probably have 12 if I had like the capacity to like, have the backyard and everything else for them because I do. I just love animals. I just love animals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so nice. I'm right there with you. I'm very much a dog person. So you coach businesses, and I think you are so smart. Is there anything that you wish you had done sooner?
Regarding coaching or regarding career choices?
Yes,
Okay, I can take that any which way.
either way, because I think a lot of times whoever is watching this podcast is thinking, should I be pivoting myself?
Mhm.
And there's certainly a lot of good information in your book, which I have sitting right here.
Okay.
But so, uh, any way you wanna answer that, I think is gonna be helpful to whoever is watching this.
Well, one of the reasons that I even came up with the Unscripted Pivots was the name of the podcast, and it remains to be the name of my company because our life is really a series of unscripted pivots. And so, one of the things that I coach teams and companies on is recognizing when it's time to pivot and how to do it with some clarity and also taking your power back. Because a lot of times when we're pivoting, we can't see the future and we're so hungry to because we want a self of assurances that, oh, this is going to work, and nobody gets the crystal ball. You have to just take a pause and say why and where and how, right? That pivoting is so important in that regard. There are a lot of pivots in my life that I wish I had done earlier. I'm getting better at it. Why? Because I'm getting better at embracing the discomfort that comes with pivots. I'm embracing fear. One of my chapters in the book is WTF because every chapter is a WTF acronym, but it's called Worth the Fear. There is no escaping fear in life when you are going to expand. And I believe in expansion. I embrace it. I am a woman. I would call myself a student of life that has a lot of curiosity, who, even more than that, is teachable. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that I'm pliable to the point where I'm going to adopt your philosophy or your way. But what I do know today is that some of the things I have learned in the past should probably be unlearned. And so that's where the expansion comes from. So, WTF, worth the fear, and then also wisdom through failure. You must fail to become wiser. That's all there is to it. And everybody wants to like avoid the F bombs. They don't want to fail. They don't want to feel the fear. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. And what I'm saying is, let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Let's not give it the power that it does not deserve. Because a lot of it, these like I'll call them wounds, they're self-inflicted. Let's stop that. I'm on a mission to do that. So when I go in and I'm coaching teams or businesses, what that looks like for an individual is very personal to them because you're coaching the whole person, which means that some of their personal life is going to impact what's happening in their work life. And then as a team, how do they all blend and move forward together in
Yeah.
unity? So it's very rewarding. I love what I do, and all the things that I have done over the course of my different careers bring value in that regard because
Mhm.
as an attorney, I was trained on how to ask the right questions, which is really important in coaching, and how
Yes.
to get down to the brass tacks, if you will.
Yeah.
And then as a commercial real estate executive, and especially being in business development, I understand what it is to build relationships and how to nurture them and how to listen to what the client needs and to lead with solution and not just focus on the problem. So there are so many things that brought me to here. So, and I've been doing it for a very long time. And now the entrepreneurial part of it, running my own LLC, that has just been that's been an expansion that has demanded a lot of patience, attention, and grace.
Mhm.
Give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is not easy to be really so well versed and experienced in our life, in our career, or in any aspect, and then be new again. Because being new means you have to be a beginner. And a lot of people that, like myself and like you, when we're trying something new, we're not familiar with stumbling so often. And, I'm saying embrace the stumble. If something is out there that you want to do it even though you're not going to be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. We perfect things, but we never arrive at perfect. You've got to fail forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've always thought perfection is the enemy of getting it done,
Yeah,
right?
it is. It
Yeah.
creates a sense of paralysis. It
Yeah.
absolutely does. And you know what? That's just ego. EGO, edging goodness out. I have to say to myself, why do I care so much about this? Even when I go forth and I'm doing presentations, and then you can be very nervous that, will I remember what I need to say? But the truth is that I'm coming into a room, be prepared, but just don't think it's going to be perfect. I'm there to be of service. And even when I'm coaching my clients, what I recognize is I'm there to be of service. It's not how smart or good or whatever I look, it's about the experience for them. What can they get out of it? How can I communicate on their terms? I'm
Yeah.
very careful to do a thorough background with them so I understand what their language is.
Yeah.
So that when I'm coaching, we can really kind of like, have a synergy that needs to
Yeah.
exist. Yeah.
So one thing I noticed about you, so I'm a big proponent of peer groups.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
sometimes you can build your own, and one thing I noticed about you is you have surrounded yourself with some pretty smart business women. So, where did you meet all how'd you pick all these smart business women up? Where did you meet them? How did you do this?
Well, you collected along the way. WTF, who to follow. I have a whole chapter in my book about that because we are the company that we keep and what we surround ourselves with. And so a lot of that is nurtured intentionally, but a lot of times it just happens organically. Now I have placed myself in conferences and meetings and in situations, networking opportunities that were strategically smart. There's no doubt about that. But then it's like, where are you going with it? What really entertains me is not the ones that I'm prepared to meet because before I go into any event, I will do my homework around, who's speaking, why it's going on, anything around the philanthropic efforts, whatever there is, right? I do homework because I'm just a homework kind of gal. But that said, when you just allow it to happen too, what you can notice and who you can meet is absolutely it's amazing. So be
Yeah.
present, we cannot like overshout the importance of being present when you're at these things because you will meet the right people and then don't stay away from the ordinary questions, right? I mean, you can be more creative. But
Yeah.
when I think about how you and I met, so there we have a common, friend.
Mhm.
And I was in the throes of finishing up and wrapping up the book, as were you. So we were
Mhm.
literally strangers at the time, but we were parallel in our journey.
Right.
So Kristen Croxton, shout out to you, girl, we love you.
Yeah.
Part of your WPO group that you chair, as a member, she's so fond of you, and she was just shouting your praises all the time, and then she was like, "Yeah, yeah, Marla's going through it too, because she's listening to you and she's listening to me," and then she put us together. So I bring that up because that's an example of when we are intentional about who we are introducing to whom. And that's the kind of stuff that really expands our circle. And I love when, people in general, but women in particular, because historically women were kind of not as generous about making the connections. They were a
Right.
little like, closed vest or jealous or guarding, who they knew, what they knew. And I see an enormous change in the last 10, 15 plus years in that. And it's wonderful, how you can create that social network ripple effect.
Mhm.
Very, very powerful stuff. But you're
Yeah.
right. I know a lot of great people, great women, but I have been fortunate in sales, to tell you the truth, to attend a lot of stuff. When you're in business development, those companies will deploy you. So you are front and center in a lot of activity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have done, like you said, you've put yourself in uncomfortable situations and you've learned a lot from it. So what was the most difficult experience that you endured while you were developing your skills in the business world?
Well, it's funny, Marla. You'll get any kind of answer out of me depending upon what it touches. But when you said that, I went back way, way back when you said what was one of the most difficult. And what came to mind is when I left practicing law, albeit briefly, to know that all of a sudden I'm going to be a stay-at-home parent. And I'm not discounting the importance of that, but I was unfamiliar with it. And what is that going to look like? And I'm disengaging from a more or I should say less chaotic world, right? You walk into an office, we're in suits, we know what we have to do, and now you're wearing, spit up in your hair and you've got all these things going and you're pregnant yet again. So I will tell you that probably was one of the most disruptive, like, who am I and what am I doing?
Yeah.
Especially after spending all that time in higher education. So that's where I went when you asked me that, and that's like many moons ago. But I would say probably when I was, going to be starting my own company. That's another thing. There's so many of them. I don't even know what to say. What was the most challenging? What I do know today is that I am really comfortable with being a beginner. But what I'm comfortable with, what I accept, is that I know I'm not going to like it. Because listen, like many women that are high achievers, I'm type A. I'm not claiming to be anything but that, right? But what I know today is that I want to walk the walk. I'm very good at coaching people and telling them to get outside their comfort zones and to follow their intuitive pull, to honor that voice that is guiding them somewhere. And they
Yeah.
know it for a fact, because the resistance to that is a hell of a lot more painful than the failures that you will experience on the other side as you improve. It's a whole lot more painful. So I wouldn't really point to one thing. There's a series of them. I mean, I'm not 20 years old, right? I mean, I've been on the planet for a minute, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what to refer to.
Well, in your book, you have a lot of actionable strategies.
Yes.
Ask yourself, and what is the fix? And the wisdom that you have in this book is just incredible. And I just how did you come up with all of these strategies? Because there's a lot.
There are. Well, I mean, again, it's like lived experience or things that I have seen other people do and do successfully, right? We're I collect that all of that stuff that works or doesn't work. I just all goes in, all goes in. And this was such a beautiful way to share it. And you're referring to another WTF, right? Throughout the book, it consistently says WTF, what's the fix? And they're just little suggestive, easy to do changes that strategically can get you to the next place, right? Most of which I have done personally or I have seen other people do successfully. So this was my opportunity to just share those tidbits. And what's really happening is that people will read the book, and what I'm being told by them is that they'll open it on any given day, and then bam, they turn to what, page 78, whatever, right? I don't even know what's on page 78. So, and all of a sudden they're like, they'll read two paragraphs and they'll say, oh, wow, that's exactly what I needed today. So it just tickles me how people are utilizing it. And, there's a lot of like little just, highlights. And so it's
Yeah.
fun. I want to introduce the lightness to the pivot, because guess what? We're going to go through change. We are going to experience curveballs.
Yeah.
That is guaranteed in life as much as death and taxes. There is no way we're getting through things without being surprised.
Right.
And how we treat that surprise, that's what's going to define us. It's not the WTF moment, it's the pivot that follows. Yeah.
And how you react to it. And one of the
Mhm.
sections in your book is about laughing it off. And I think laughing is so important.
It
So
is.
And I think you mentioned finding your laughing buddy. Who's that laughing buddy for you now?
Oh my gosh, right now it's the mirror. All I do is laugh. You know, my mom was such a laugher, and it's not that we don't take life seriously because I take it very seriously, but I just my laughing buddy right now is John. I mean, you know, my husband, I'll tell you one of the things that made me wildly attracted to him in the beginning was his sense of humor and his playfulness. And he has that and I just fall in love with it every single day.
Yeah,
He's just fun and he's light. Not all of life is pleasant or pretty. You know, we experience dark times, hard times. I have been through many things, you know, saying goodbye to 2 brothers the last 2 years. You know, one died of alcoholism, the other one died of cancer. It's really hard to see your siblings go, you know, at
yeah,
age 60 and 58. They're not supposed to go yet, you
no,
know? Saying goodbye to my mother, I mean, horrible. She was sick for a very long time. So, you know, she was her last, few months were in a hospital where she knew this was the end. Long drawn out. You know, saying goodbye to my grandmother, say ending a first marriage. But you know what? That wasn't so painful because we did that amicably. We have a very unique situation in as much as we both knew that it was time to just be parents together, that we did that very well and we were dedicated, but everything else had kind of fallen by the wayside long before. And, you know, I've been with, we got divorced, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, 16 years ago, and we are like buddies. And
it's
it was
great.
like that from day one. We just said, okay, we have 4 kids. We both agree that they come first and they're the most important people in both of our lives. Nobody else is going to love them the way we do.
Yeah,
Let's keep that united front. And to this day, that's what we do. You
yeah,
know, I mean, our children are 33, 31, 29, 26. So they're full grown,
mhm,
but they still need us.
they do. Yeah,
And there's things that go on in their lives, and Pat and I get on the phone and we discuss it. Okay, this one needs that, or hey, can he come see you? Like we're present and we're united, and it's beautiful. And I will say a shout out to his wife, who doesn't even meddle with any of that. She's a beautiful soul. So, and my husband doesn't either. So we have no interference, and I feel very fortunate about that.
yeah,
But yeah, the children are always going to be most important. I do look back at my career and my success, Marla. I was very fortunate for it to take off the way it did, but that also meant that I wasn't an at-home mom a whole lot when they were younger. I mean, there were a lot of demands. I have a lot of sad memories about not being there on Halloween. YULI has every conference back in the day during Halloween. I was always in a different state. Like, there's certain things, there's sacrifice that come for women
yeah,
that are also parents. We all have to sacrifice, period. But when you have to say no to your child or I won't be there, it's a struggle, but it's a struggle that men have been dealing with for all of time, and
yeah,
so now we wanted to have, the opportunities that were, afforded them, so that's the sacrifice you make, and you have to make a choice.
yeah, yeah. Is there anything that you wish you had done sooner?
A few things. A few things, but I don't wanna say it and then offend anybody, so that's why you're getting a pause because it might come out wrong. I wish that I trusted myself enough to start my own company sooner, because even though what I'm doing today, I've been doing for a long time, I wasn't doing as as a boss like
Yeah,
myself, and so I wish I would have known that that would be not only okay, but a perfect fit and successful in its own right. But it goes back to when you don't have any evidence, you don't have any track record, it's so easy to get caught up in like, well, that's not going to work. And that is so untrue. And another thing, I was tied to the corporate paycheck. We all need a paycheck, not everybody, but most of us. And we say there's well, how else would I earn? And the silly thing is like, why do we even think there's only one way to earn? I mean, I started out earning as a lawyer and then later as a commercial real estate executive, and then, as an executive coach and a speaker for hire. So there are so many ways, and so it's just about having the, fortitude, having the faith. I'm a very spiritual person, you know that. Work hard, and it
yeah.
all works out.
It
It all
it
works out.
does, it does.
It
I'm
does.
right there with you because I just didn't
Yeah,
realize how fun it would be to work with businesses and business
yeah,
owners. Yeah, so I'm right there with you. I wish I'd done it sooner too. Speaking of finance, there is a chapter in your book where you talk about finance.
Mhm.
and how as women we don't talk about money
Mhm.
as much, and we probably should.
Yeah.
What made you go there?
Okay. So I'm not a finance girly. You are, Marla. So it's interesting that it's landing with you like that. The chapter is called WTF Women Thriving Financially. And in that book, I do make notes. In fact, I think there's a lot of footnotes, that are in that book because I'm referring to statistics and to other articles that talk about the disparity between how men and women are paid and that women don't want to talk about the money. But I will tell you from a personal level, the reason that chapter was written is because I wanted to examine the relationship between money and power within a marriage, within a family. What does that look like? Because that is a wound that I continue to address in my own life. And what I mean by that is when I look back to my early childhood, 15, 16 years old, I knew that I was going to be a career person, not because I was so driven to be intelligent or advanced or whatever, because all my friends at the time were really, "Oh, I wanna get married." They were thinking about that, and I said, "Oh, no." I saw what marriage looked like from my parents. I was like, "I'm not signing up for that." Like, one day, but that won't be the first thing I do, and I was determined to make enough money that I would be able to have choice in life, and I don't mean choice as to what, expensive bag I was gonna get. What I want to know is that I, at all times, maintained some independence, because when I saw my grandmother I didn't see my grandmother get divorced. By the time I was in the picture, she was divorced, but I heard the stories. And then my mother, and being stay-at-home parents, what that looked like when you were beholden to your ex-husband who now doesn't like you, for how was things going to get paid. And I'm not going to say my father was necessarily unfair. I witnessed pain and I witnessed struggle. And so I always knew that I wanted to have a job so I could, make my choices and be independent. And so it really was, a curveball. It was an unscripted pivot that I would actually have children and then leave, what was a budding legal career to be a stay-at-home mom, because it certainly put me in the position that I wanted to avoid in the first place, right? Because now he was driving the bus. Now, he was very gracious and all of that, but admittedly, it was a catalyst to me wanting to get back out to work, because once you have 4 kids and you have all those bills and things pile up, and he's very sensible about money, maybe a little too much, a little bit of frugal, even though he didn't have to be. And I said, "Oh no, you're not going to tell me what we can and can't do." When I knew we could, and I said, "That's okay. Let me pitch in. I'm going to get my own job." And it was a catalyst. I really so. The Women Thriving Financial chapter refers to how you can save. It kind of alludes to different things that you can look up and whatnot, platforms that will manage money or cite more statistics. But really for me, that chapter is about what does it look like? Are you comfortable with the money situation and in your life and in your head? How and why is it important?
Uh-huh.
And it's so interesting because more and more, there's nothing new about this, but I'd say in the last 10 years or so, I have seen more women being the breadwinners in their household. And what does that dynamic look like? Because I will tell you, when I went from making nothing at a stay-at-home mom and then earning 7 figures and out earning my first husband by a whole hell of a lot, the power dynamic shifted. Now, should it? I don't really think so. But that's what it gets a little bit corrupt. And I didn't recognize, and I called myself out in that chapter, that I literally did, under different details, the same thing that both the men with my mother and my grandmother. It's like I continued the cycle, but not in the same way. What I mean by that is, and when I got divorced, he got half of it was all good. That was amicable. But I then knew I could make choices without consulting him.
Mhm.
And so that would look like, but I mean, I thought they were fun choices, like, "Oh, you know what? Let's go charter a sailboat in the British Virgin Islands, and we'll take the kids, and we'll get on a catamaran boat, whatever we do." And he'd be like, "Well, it's like 30,000 for the week." And I'm like, I just brought in a few million this year, like, we can afford it." And so he didn't want to leap at that, but I wanted to do stuff like that. And so it was just like, "Get on the boat, Pat." And, so when I look back at my choices, when I blew out our house that we had and I almost, like, doubled the size of it because the paychecks were coming in, he was like, "Well, this house is fine." I'm like, "No, it's cramped, and, let's add 2,000 square feet." And, just because you could doesn't mean you should, and
Yeah.
I have since made, amends to him and said, "Gee, you were along for a lot of that ride. Now, sure, you liked that I made that kind of money. It funded the 529s. Those kids' colleges were paid for way before they went. That was pleasant. But the truth of the matter is, I kind of like became like the powerhouse, and I think that his voice in the process shrunk. So that chapter really is to bring awareness to how is money working in your life? Are you putting too much importance on it? Do you feel that you don't have a voice at work or in your home? Just it's an examination of the feelings around that. And then it gives some strategies and tips. But I'm not a finance girl. I would never profess to be. It has more to do with power and
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you have said that before, but
Yeah.
your advice in that chapter, I think, because, I am a geek about that stuff,
Yes.
and your advice in that chapter is very good. I do think every oh, I'm just such a proponent of women understanding their money and how to save it, what it's for, how to spend, all of that. So I'm glad you have that chapter in the book.
Yes. Now, of course, for you being the type of business coach that you are, where you go in there and you're really dissecting, like, how are they going to earn and whatnot? Like, I'm a different type of coach than that,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
that you glommed onto that, and a lot of the information that's shared in that chapter, is going back to footnotes. Like, I'm giving you research because I think everything that I was sharing was very important, and so I'm happy that it made sense to you and it
Totally.
passed the muster with you because honestly, if you say it was good, then it was good because you are finance, intelligent and, you're driven by those decisions in the business community. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, that's why people hire you because you know all about that. So I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. No, I think it was good. So, what was your favorite chapter in the book to write?
Probably worth the fear. Honestly,
Yeah.
the second one, I couldn't even land that plane. That chapter is so much longer than the other chapters. This is the first book I ever wrote, and I wrote it on my own. I didn't have a ghostwriter or anything. I was really writing from experience, all the personal stories and things that clients and friends have gone through, and then the WTF coaching framework, which just really organically evolved. It was not that I set out to do that, it became a thing. I loved it, but when I came to Worth the Fear, that could have been its own darn book. And because I didn't like, I'm writing a second book now, Marla, which we'll see if it changes the title, but right now it's called Master the Pivot. So it's an acronym. So Master the Pivot, how bold leaders turn chaos into their competitive edge. And so I have a book coach for this one. Now, not a ghostwriter, but a book coach. And I am learning how to approach writing in a realistic fashion. And it's very different than WTF. I wrote chapters just based on what I was feeling at the time. And Worth the Fear was a hard one to end because there was so much in there. But I really, really, I love that chapter title the
Yeah.
most. And it was changed at the end. I thought that I would call it What's the Fear? Because I list fears in there that happen in life. And then I
Mhm.
was like, "No, my message is that it's WTF, it's worth the fear."
Yeah.
Fear is just fuel. How are you going to use it? It only comes up when something's important. So to me, it's just a signal. That's all it
Yeah.
is.
It
You
should be fuel,
Yes,
but it's a showstopper for some.
it can be,
Yeah.
but
So this is why your book is so important.
yes. And I love coaching on that because mostly people that are hiring me are because they're in discomfort, because they're in fear and they can't see it. And having somebody walk through it and diffuse it the way that I do, especially utilizing this framework, it brings a little bit of joy, a little laughter, a little levity to it. But it's also, I'm an accountability partner because as fun as that all sounds, I'm a no BS coach. I
Yeah.
am from the East Coast. It's like, what is it that you want to accomplish?
Yeah.
It's my responsibility to make sure that we stay on track. Now, there will be detours, maybe timelines will shift, but there must be reasons attached to that that are real and not necessarily self imposed because of delay, which would come from procrastination, you know, things along those lines.
Yeah. So, you know a lot about business and your forte is sales. Mine is more, finance, but we both focus a bit on general what is going on in the business. So do you have any disciplines that you'd like to share about or good business practice that you think is important in a business?
Tell me more. When you say good business practice, because now I know I'm talking to a business coach. I think where you may be going with this might be a little bit different than where I would. So when I'm coaching the individuals within the teams, is that what you're referring to?
Well, I know you have the ability to look at, for example, sales.
Mhm. Mhm.
So a business wants to increase their revenue. And so what would you suggest to that business? Obviously, you have to ask questions, but where would you start with the questions?
Well, if they're not meeting their goals, right, you first have to look at why. Like, are they understaffed? Okay. And if the answer to that is no, they have enough people, but the people aren't working either well together, that's a whole nother issue, right? Is there what are the team dynamics? You have to examine that. And then there are some teams that really act as independent soldiers. They don't necessarily need to play off each other. So there's so many, it is so unique. And you know this, Marla, when you go into a company, like what it is that you're dealing with. But a lot of it comes back to lack of performance, and sometimes it's not lack of communication within there, but it's the trust factor or it's the resources that are given or not given to the individual who's going out there to attract more business. I mean, there's a lot to dissect. I don't even know that there's one universal plan, but what I do ask everybody when I come to the table is like, let's be honest. Let's park the self judgment out the door. We're not judging you. We're not judging anybody else because none of that has any kind of space. It will not contribute to the conversation or the solution in a positive way. So that's the first thing. It's almost like, even though it can be a very emotional experience, it has to be somewhat mechanical
Right.
in its expression. Right. So it's always like everybody like get outside themselves and now let's look at it. And it's really cool. And you've probably experienced this that as a coach, we're coming from a place of neutrality. We're not clouded by any of the things that happened between, Sally and Sarah last week and this, like none of that even matters. And so we can get down to brass tacks, which is really, really important because we're there to move the needle. We're there to help them succeed. Better revenue, let's go. But why that usually is, can change from scenario to scenario,
Yeah.
but a lot of it, the pattern I would see is the reluctancy to pivot because sometimes companies or teams are so fixated on their plan that they think any departure from that speaks to failure. And that's why I'm writing the second book where, PIVOT stands for, okay, you've got an issue here. You have to pivot, but you don't want to. Let's look at this. P, we're going to pause and prioritize, the situation. And then I stands for identify the opportunity because really it's all about looking at it as something that you're going to fix. Okay. Not so much where it's at in the problem. Let's just get rid of that. We're now moving towards solution.
Uh-huh.
Right. And not sitting in that muck. People get stuck in the muck, right? V stands for, vet your options. And O stands for outreach. That's when you're going to consult like your stakeholders, your clients, people that would weigh in. And T is for test and take the leap and then do it.
Yeah.
But I will tell you reluctancy and that being unassured, like that really, that's usually what creates a lot of the problems and keeps them back or holding on to clients or projections that they should no longer. One of the things too is not just what you're adding, it's what you're shedding. You have to think what's not working. And sometimes it's who's not working. Maybe it's a system, maybe it's a group of people. But the shedding aspect of this to get to the next place, extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah. You only have so much as far as resources. And I think what
Yeah.
I hear you saying, which is so important, is focus.
Mhm.
And you're smart enough and you've been um, in business long enough to really identify what is it that we're going to focus on, and how are we going to get there. It's just you've done it and you've had
Like,
success at it. And so it's like,
I'm, like,
yeah,
laughing, I mean, after writing the second book, it's like you try to remember, yeah, so it was chapter 6. I have the chapter, WTF, where to focus. I mean,
there
that's
you
like
go.
and it says that the tagline for that is, "Focus is the secret to progress."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
So
very true. And so many entrepreneurs think that they're going to have these 15 or 20 goals. And, that
mhm.
saying is if everything is important, nothing is important. So, Yeah, you really help.
There's the other chapter, Marla. I don't know if you remember, okay? WTF, win tiny first.
Yeah,
Such an important message
yeah,
about narrowing it down and taking that next indicated step that's gonna get you to the right place. And then to your point, you don't need 10 goals, right? What are your top 3? We're talking about executing and completing, okay?
yeah,
Not adding, because what that does is dilute the progress
yeah,
to where you need to go. But it tends to happen, and I'm sure like you, we're herding
yeah,
cats here
yeah,
because a lot of times it's that explosive excitement of all the what can be. Okay, that's great. We like excitement, enthusiasm, but at the end of the day, sometimes they're avoiding the first 2 things that need to be done because they're uncomfortable.
yep.
Okay, so let's just add to the pile. Let's make it prettier. Let's make it more digestible. But I'm like, no, we're here for a meal. That we're having dinner. You're talking about next month's lunch. Okay, we'll get there, but
Yeah,
not yet. Not
yeah.
yet. Win tiny first. WTF?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, and really when you help businesses focus,
Hmm.
employees get so confused when there are, like, so many things that you're
Yeah.
talking about, it's
Yeah.
like and you bring it down to maybe 2 or 3 or 4, but not
Hmm.
10 or 15, so love it. So, we've had a great conversation. Is there a question you wish I had asked?
Question that I wish. Well, probably, what does WTF mean to you today? Because that answer changes like weekly. It weekly. And it's so cool because you know what I'm gonna say to you? Because it literally came up for me in an email I was sending to a bunch of women, a Zoom invite. WTF, wisdom to forward. And when I was trying to express to the people I was inviting to this group coaching experience that I'm launching next month, I wanted them to know that I didn't put them on the invite just because I thought they were going to join my coaching community, or I was even suggesting boldly that I needed to coach them, or they needed it. And first of all, coaching isn't for broken people. It's not even about being broken. It's about getting better. However, I was like, where's my WTF in this? Because the message was like, share this with others that you think might find value in this. So WTF, wisdom to forward.
Yeah.
And I just am like, there is an endless amount of ways that you can redefine WTF. We have AI at our disposal. You can literally, and the coolest thing is that people speak WTF to me. They get on their phone, they're like, "Okay," and we, like, literally have, like, WTF, like, verbal tennis. It's like
Back and
they come
forth?
yeah, no, because of all the ways you can describe a situation or emotion or a concept using WTF, it's absolutely hilarious. It's playful. I'm gonna come full circle. You asked who had the most impact on me, and I'm gonna say, as I speak out loud, my mother, because she was always wicked smart and she attracts so many people. She had this magnetic personality, but she was playful at its core, and we all adored that for her because she just, you know what, she exuded a warmth and a safety that you don't find in a lot of people. And everybody wanted to be her friend because she was
I
just
think you have
accessible,
that
you
same
know? It's like,
characteristic.
well, thank you. Thank you. And my grandmother was like that too, you know? And so I hope that I inherited some of those qualities because they're the ones that made such an impact on me and that are so beloved memories of both of them, which by the way, I mean, like, look, like I literally, here they are. I keep a picture of them whenever I'm
Nice.
doing something. And this frame was my mother's. So when she passed, I wouldn't put it in this frame. I can't change this frame because this is mom's. This is what my, 75-year-old mom liked. And so, but I have them there because they
Yes.
are the women that came before me. They are the ones that impacted me and they're the ones that molded me. And, as you know, in the book, I say my grandmother, said, Danielle, I would always be like, "Oh, is it gonna work out? Am I gonna pass the bar? Oh, am I gonna have a girl after having 3 boys?" All the worries. And she says like, "Danielle, you have a horseshoe up your ass." And so I like laughed. She first started saying it when I was 9 and she said it until the day she died. And so today when I get uncomfortable and I'm like, you're going for a big stretch. You don't know if you can do this. I hear her and I laugh. And I'm like, Danielle, you have a horseshoe up your ass. And I remember her and I feel her hug when I'm saying it to myself because that's what it's about. Just dial it back, dial it down. We are all capable of great things. And if it's meant for you, you will know, but put in the footwork and then
Yeah.
just move forward. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I love it. I really always enjoy talking to you. I appreciate you just introduced me to somebody amazing not
Yes.
that long ago, and we were able to have lunch, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, we have so many things in common." That's June Bardwell. She's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
And but that's just one of the many, many women that you have, Christine,
Mhm.
that
Well,
you
you
just
came
have
to my book launch. It was just so
I
cool. You
did.
came to my book launch and we barely knew each other and you said yes and I was like so flattered. And then you got to meet some of the women in my circle and now you're doing the same thing. Every time we're in the same spot, you're introducing me, you're putting out emails. I mean, it's like a relationship built on respect and reciprocity. Like we want to do that because we know that when we're making these introductions, we're actually adding value. It's not like favor for favor. It's none of that. All of it's organic and it's authentic. And those are the best seeds you can plant.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree, and I'm excited. So you're gonna be
Yeah.
speaking to my WPO group
Yes.
October 1st, and I'm so excited about that at Comerica. So, and with all the WPO women, I know it's gonna be an amazing event, and I thank you. Thank you for being a guest on my podcast and helping
One of the
me.
first. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You've coached me, so I appreciate that. It's really been fun, and I
I love
appreciate it.
that. I love that. You also have shared your wisdom with me. And, it's like in any given relationship, it's just who's further down the road in one aspect. I've already
Yep.
gone through this trial. So it's just great. It's so good to
Yeah.
thank you for having me on. Thank you for the opportunities you continue to present. I really look forward to meeting the WTF, UPO, WTF, WPO. Well, we're going to go in there. Hey, WTF, WPO, the WPO members, and talking about, curveballs and, turning them into catalysts for action. So it's going to be a
Yeah.
great event. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Me too. And thank you again. This is just
Yeah.
wonderful, and we're gonna have a great time.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks. Thanks for the
Bye.
opportunity, Marla. Thank you.